r/rules horror. Posted by u/4c_enjoyer. The Lotus Hunter Game, Part 1. I quite like chess. I'm far from the best at it, but I can hold my own and know my way around the 64 squares. But I don't think there was anything that could have prepared me for the game I'm still playing as I write this. I had just gotten back from a particularly brutal shift at work when I slid my key into the lock and opened my apartment door to a bizarre sight. First of all, it wasn't my apartment. A strange feeling of dread washed over me as I went to double-check the room number, already knowing the answer. My key had fit in the lock. Sure enough, this was my apartment. My apartment normally looked like that of any other tired uni student, sparsely decorated yet still somehow messy. Instead of the comforting familiarity of my small studio apartment, however, there was a field of pink lotuses that went as far as the eye could see. A mix of purples, blues, and hints of orange covered the ankle-high water, illuminated by the stars above and the setting sun barely visible peeking over the horizon. There were stars in my apartment. There was a fucking sunset in my apartment. The view was interrupted only by black marble pillars that reached far past my side into the sky, placed roughly 10 meters from each other in a grid. Giant networks of vines stretched from pillar to pillar, likely enough to support someone's weight. I stepped back and looked down the hallway. It was eerily silent. I could normally hear something, anything, through the paper-thin walls of the apartment complex. Nothing. Out of sheer desperation, I walked down 3 doors to my buddy's apartment. He keeps a spare key hidden in the ceiling tiles, because you and I are the only ones here dull enough to reach it. After reaching up and dislodging the ceiling tile, I took the spare key attached to it by tape. After opening the door, I was met with a solid wall. The door led to nowhere. I looked down the hall from where I came, and ran to the elevator. I went to press the button to go to the ground floor, only to see that the buttons themselves were gone. And something told me that even if they weren't gone, the elevator doors would just open to another wall. At this point, I figured it was a dream. I'd become lucid in dreams before, and this would be no exception. I did my usual test and counted the number of fingers on my hands. A slight panic washed over me as I counted to exactly 10. Given there was nothing left to do at this point, I decided to just try and accept whatever was happening and proceed. I took off my socks and shoes and stepped into the field of lotuses. Immediately after I entered the field, I heard the sound of the door slamming behind me. I turned around, and was met only with more of the field. Wherever I was, it wasn't my apartment. I turned back to see a small table made of marble and pink lotuses in what I could have sworn was empty space a few seconds ago. Atop it was an 8x8 grid of alternating black and white marble squares. The oh-so-familiar chessboard. I walked over to the chessboard and was stunned by just how beautiful it was. The patterning on the marble was the most intricate I'd ever seen, and the lotuses surrounding the edge served to emphasize the board even more. The pieces too were impossibly intricate. They seemed to be made of wood, and were carved into incredibly detailed sculptures. The pawns looked like humans with patterned, shin-length robes around their waist with a sash that went from their right shoulder to their left flank over a bare, muscular chest. Closer inspection, however, showed that their faces were distinctly non-human. Their ears were too long, their teeth too sharp and their face too gone. They looked vampire-esque. The rooks appeared to be some kind of warrior, wielding a fierce axe and tall wooden shield. Yet for some reason, 6 heads were perched upon their sturdy shoulders instead of 1. The knights took the form of bipedal horsemen with pointed shields and swords. They resembled a minotaur, but with a distinctly equine appearance rather than bullish. The bishops were some kind of mermaid, perched upon white and black marble rocks with flowing hair that reached halfway down their tail. The carving was so intricate I could have sworn I saw its hair swaying in the wind. The queen was a large, coiling serpent holding a marble orb in its mouth. Its individual scales somehow seemed to shine from the starlight above. The base of the queen did not resemble rocky terrain like all the other pieces, but rather appeared as a tidal wave crashing upon the tail of the serpent. I looked over to the king's squares. The kings were missing. It was then I saw the piece of paper on the center of the chessboard. I picked up the paper and unfolded it, and read the note. "Whoever you are, I pray for you." Bad sign right off the bat. I kept reading. "If you found this note, that means you're stuck in the game." For me, it was go. The writer of the note I found played mahjong. Whatever game you have, you're the first player and need to win the game. Unfortunately, it's never that simple. There are rules. Rule 1, the rules are guidelines. Just as everyone's game is different, so are the dangers. However, there are elements that don't change. Rule 2, you have an unlimited amount of time to calculate each move, but must wait at least 12 hours before your next move. During that time, however, you have to contend with the consequences of your previous move. Rule 3, there are hidden rooms in some of the pillars and under parts of the Lotus Field. I don't know where all of them are, but many do exist, having been made by other players during their unlimited time in the early stages of their games. The creatures have some ability that lets them sense your general location, although it does not seem to be specific enough to locate hiding places or safe rooms they do not know about. However, you must be careful. If a creature is able to locate the hideout, any subsequent creatures will also be aware of its existence. Rule 4, each game piece is a threat. It doesn't matter what game it is, either. Mahjong, Go, chess, backgammon, nine men's Morris, whatever, each game piece will appear to you as some sort of creature. In the time after you make your move, you'll find yourself stalked by the creature from the game piece. If you have to use multiple game pieces in a single move, you have to deal with every piece you use. In addition, every 24 hours you go without making a move, more of the same creature will appear. The number of creatures that appear will vary, but a general rule is that more creatures will appear if that creature is less powerful. Rule 4a, your heritage usually determines the creatures you'll have to contend with. If you're of mixed descent, you'll likely have to deal with creatures from the most prominent of your heritages. If you're 60% Russian and 40% Greek, you'll probably find yourself dealing with a Baba Yaga at some point. Rule 5, if your game has pieces of different value, like in chess, the following will apply to only the weakest pieces. If your game uses pieces of identical value, like in Go, the following will apply to the first 15 pieces you use. Rule 5a, whatever you have to contend with, you likely won't be able to deal with it head-on unless you're an experienced martial artist or athlete. In addition, no matter what it is, these creatures can't die. Even if it's something that has specified weaknesses in their original mythology like silver against a werewolf, it will persist and continue the attack. Rule 6, the following will apply to pieces of medium value if your game has differently valued pieces, or for the next 15 pieces you use if your game has identically valued pieces. Rule 6a, whatever you have to contend with, you will not be able to take it head-on without a weapon. You should be good if you have a gun or blade on you, but otherwise you should stay away. Unlike the weaker creatures, who will get back up no matter what, these creatures can be temporarily killed. If they are killed, they will get back up 30 minutes after their death and continue their hunt. Rule 7, the following will apply to pieces of high value, such as a rook in chess, if your game has differently valued pieces, or for the next 30 pieces you use if your game has identically valued pieces. Rule 7a, you will not be able to defeat whatever you have to contend with head-on. While you could lay traps or injure them, you would not be able to kill them even if you had a gun. The only way to defeat a creature of this rank is to exploit any weakness it has in its original mythology or to find a way to exploit its anatomy, such as putting out its eyes. If you manage to kill a creature this way, it will get back up after 2 hours. If you only injure it, it will fully regenerate within 30 minutes. Rule 8, the following will apply to pieces of very high value, such as a queen in chess, if your game has differently valued pieces, or for any pieces you use after move 60 if your game has identically valued pieces. I pray you can end your game swiftly without having to deal with these. Rule 8a, these creatures are impervious to damage, are incredibly fast and powerful, and are incredibly intelligent. Whereas other pieces' intelligence is determined by what the actual creature is, even the most primitive of monsters will have immense knowledge. They are fully capable of laying traps and determining your movement patterns. Avoid at all costs. Do not wait any longer than necessary before making your move. Rule 8b, unlike other pieces, the number of creatures does not increase with these pieces. However, they are still undoubtedly more dangerous. Rule 9, the board cannot move. You cannot take the board with you into a safe room, and if you run a great distance from a piece, you will have to go all the way back to make your move. Rule 10, you are guaranteed safety while making your move. As soon as you touch the board or any of the pieces, if at least 12 hours have passed since your last move, any creature pursuing you will vanish. The next creature will appear at the board 60 seconds after making your move. I wish I could give you more information. But the game is ever changing, and what is true for me may not be true for you. However, the information on this note is accurate. I wrote this letter after comparing my experience with the information on the letter of the previous player. The information here is exclusively the information that overlaps between my knowledge and the letter's information. Well shit. I hope those safe rooms have food. I think I know what move I need to make. As long as I can make a lot of pawn moves without needing to use my queen or rooks for a long time, I should be able to adapt. I need to keep the board clogged and avoid opening up the position enough to where I need to deploy my queen and rooks. Reluctantly, I reached out to the chessboard. As I reached out, a small white lotus sprouted in the square of the missing king, and a black lotus sprouted in the square of my opponent's. I played 1.d4, the queen's pawn. The board responded, with the king's knight moving to f6 seemingly of its own volition. The Indian defense. I got lucky. That was my best opening. I backed up, hiding behind a pillar 20 meters away. I peeked out, and saw a mass of lotus flowers, marble, and water rise and contort into the shape of the pawn I just moved. It was then I realized what the creatures I had to deal with were. I was up against an Aswang. A shape-shifting vampire. Its head snapped to the side and looked directly at me. And I started running.